Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's a real pleasure. Sorry, I just saw you do that. It's a real pleasure to open tonight's inaugural lecture and introduce someone who embodies so much of what the university stands for. Professor Kath Woods-Townsend has travelled an extraordinary professional journey, one she modestly describes as unusual, and many of us would call it inspiring. In many ways, Kath is the story of LifeLab, but she's so much more than that as well, as evidenced by this wonderful young man at the end. She began her career as a scientist, completing her PhD in heart developmental genetics before undertaking postdoctoral research affecting eye and brain development. Yet she's someone who has always been willing to follow a sense of purpose wherever it leads. That path brought her into secondary school science teaching here in Southampton, where working directly with young people and witnessing their curiosity, energy and potential ignited the spark that would shape the next 16 years of her career. That formative experience became the foundation of what we know as LifeLab. Over the past 16 years, Kath has shaped, defended, grown and championed LifeLab, often without consistent funding. Any senior leaders, take note. With a clarity of purpose, perseverance and vision, she has built it into an internationally recognised evidence-based programme. Under her leadership, LifeLab's small team has delivered rigorous randomised control trials, pioneered youth-led research, developed creative methodologies and advanced peer-to-peer education. Kath has championed the belief that young people should not merely receive health messages, they should question them, investigate them, and make them their own. Today, LifeLab is thriving, spanning primary and secondary schools, colleges, peer-to-peer programmes and youth-led research, reaching more than 20,000 young people in understanding the science behind their health and their futures. For our school, Kath represents something profoundly important. LifeLab joined us at the very beginning of our journey, bringing with it a culture of partnership, interdisciplinary collaboration, and a deep community trust. Kath brings this spirit into every room, a voice that offers thoughtful challenge, grounded perspective, and unwavering commitment to involving the futures of young people. This year, we were also delighted to welcome Kath into the school leadership team as Joint Deputy Head of School Research, a role she views not only as an achievement, but in typical Kath fashion, a way of giving back as well. Her lecture tonight reflects her remarkable journey from genes to classrooms to transforming the way young people see their futures. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Kath Woods-Townsend, Professor Kath Woods-Townsend. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thanks, Cheryl. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and online. Looking around the room, this is in equal measure the most intimidating and most wonderful audience I've ever faced. But so many lovely faces looking back at me. And I know that my brother is watching online from Canada, all right, Steve, and my sister Pen is here in the audience with, I think, the youngest audience member, my baby nephew, Jem. So I'm going to start, as all good stories do, at the beginning of my education journey. Before I do, I just want to say that I'm not normally one for reading from notes, but I have so much that I want to say, and I want to make sure I don't forget anything, but importantly that I don't keep you here too long. So please just bear with me. So when I was 6 years old, my teacher wrote in my school report, "She's certainly capable of a lot more than she gives." The same report noted that my Multiplication tables were non-existent. I mean, it's a good job I had a marvellous maths tutor. That I gave up easily, and that my speech was often difficult to follow. It's pretty harsh, right? I should also point out that my dad was the head teacher of the school I was at. So I think that was a pretty brave teacher. Or maybe we were just more brutally honest back then. But standing here as a professor about to deliver my inaugural lecture, I think we can safely say that early judgments don't always predict outcomes. I grew up in South London and then on to Birmingham, and I did a bit of digging around, and we didn't have the index of multiple deprivation back then, which gives a measure of how disadvantaged an area is. But mapping it now, the places I grew up would be considered in the most disadvantaged areas. I was also on free school meals for a time. And supposedly, there are trajectories that you can predict from these beginnings. My story should have gone a certain way. Lower educational attainment, reduced life chances, poorer health outcomes. But I had things that changed my story, that changed my beginning. A family immersed in education, head teacher, teacher trainers, dean of education. I couldn't really escape education. I was also surrounded by high expectations. Not pressure, but just a genuine belief in what I could do. I also had my mum and dad's friends, who didn't treat me as a child, but saw me as an individual in my own right. In London, I'd taken the 11 plus and failed. I don't really remember it being a big deal at the time. It was just in a different fork in the road. But when we moved to Birmingham, my parents advocated for me, pushed at doors, maybe because my dad was the new head of teacher training and possibly seen as an important person. I was given a place at the grammar school starting in the second year. My beginning changed, not because I became different, but because of what was available to me, who believed in me, who fought for me, and who saw me. The title of this lecture is Change the Beginning and You Change the Whole Story. And anyone who has heard me talk about LifeLab will have heard that phrase many times, sorry. But it really is the fundamental principle underlying what I do. It's about how early experiences can shape trajectories, but crucially, how those trajectories can be changed when children and young people have the opportunity and agency to shape their own stories. So, how did I get from that beginning to standing here? So a whistle-stop tour. I studied genetics at Leeds University. I was fascinated by how we develop from a single cell into who we are. Then I travelled further north to Newcastle upon Tyne. And it was during that time that I really began to understand how research works. Not just the science, but the importance of networks, collaboration, connecting people. And you really need those connections to get through the hard times. The failed experiments, the rejected papers, the roasting from your supervisor. But it's more than that. Research moves forward through those connections. A colleague once joked that my perfect job would be one where I could just sit and talk and bring people together. And I like to think that I've tried to live up to that. After my PhD, I left the cold north and moved to London to the Institute of Child Health, still working on developmental genetics, and then on to Southampton. My then husband was one of the first lecturers on the newly established BM4 medical degree programme, which tells you how long ago that was. It's about 20 years ago. And being a couple in research, trying to find your place, doing the research that you love in a single location, it's difficult. And so I had some big decisions to make, thinking about what was important to me and what my future could look like. And remembering that family of teachers, I decided to retrain as a secondary school teacher. I trained on the job, so pretty much from day one, I was in front of a class, which was terrifying and eye-opening. I'd come from this single-sex grammar school into research labs, and suddenly I was teaching kids whose lives were messy and complicated, who were dealing with stuff at home that meant the curriculum we were teaching didn't feel like it connected, and it made me question what we were actually trying to teach and why. And I'd gone into teaching partly because I wanted to inspire the next generation of scientists, which is quite naive, and it was intensely frustrating because the way we teach science is so far removed from how science actually works in labs. It's set up as this formulaic process, step-by-step process, and sometimes the aim of teaching can feel like it's about getting the right answer in exams, and it got quite easy to feel disillusioned. But it was the people, my colleagues and mentors, who kept bringing me back to the why. I don't know if it's just science departments, but the science crew were always so much fun. I rarely made it out of the science department to the staff room. And some of these people are here tonight and online, and I just wanted to say to you that I feel so fortunate to have worked with you. You really opened my eyes to what good teaching looks like, the difference between expecting to simply transmit knowledge to passive brains or trying to create curious, enthusiastic people who want to keep finding out more. Ultimately, I left teaching. I loved the interaction with young people, but I felt caught up in a curriculum that felt too restrictive and disconnected from real life and the pressures of focusing on an end goal, being passing an exam. So I came back into research, working with stem cells, right back at the very start of development. I spent time making beating heart cells in a Petri dish, which kind of blew my mind. And I did try to find one of my old videos, but I think they've been lost in the depths of time. And it was quite a short-lived role, because as at the same time, I was also making my own beating heart cells. I became pregnant about 2 months after leaving teaching. Sorry, Seb, that's just the first photo. What do you? So fast forward to after maternity leave, and my previous head of science sent me an advert, a position helping to establish an education programme to engage school students with science behind health messages. And I was only eligible to apply because I'd got a teaching qualification. It sounded perfect. The post was in the School of Education, but the advert mentioned names I recognised from the Faculty of Medicine. So I reached out, had a chat with Mark Hansen, had an interview with Marcus, Hazel and Janice, and that was the beginning of my LifeLab journey. But before I tell you how LifeLab came to be, I want to just take a moment to explain why it matters. As a human, our risk of developing non-communicable diseases like heart disease or type 2 diabetes increases as we get older. That's just a fact. But we want to be on the best trajectory. We want to shift that trajectory. And we know that there are key time points where we can intervene. Early in life, our bodies are able to respond to what's going on around us. And as we get older, this is less possible. So working earlier in life, you can shift those trajectories and put us on better starting points. And we've been using this slide for the best part of the last decade. And it's really disheartening that when I come to this bit, I still say the same thing. The majority of the attention is up at that far corner. When we have symptoms, when we have disease, that's where all the attention is focused and we treat symptoms. And when we talk about prevention, we're really talking about early diagnosis, trying to find who the people that have high blood pressure, who we can treat. And actually, if we really want to transform health, we have to be truly thinking about prevention and working much earlier. Working with teenagers offers a triple dividend: the opportunity to impact their health now, their health in their future, but as they are the parents of the next generation, working with them gives the next generation a better chance of starting life in the best possible way. This was the premise behind LifeLab. So I shared that first job with another teacher, Kerry. We were exploring whether we could put together a programme that worked for researchers in the lab, was attractive to schools, and was interesting and engaging for students. Luckily, the answer was yes. But after that first year, my partner in crime went back to her school, and I moved into what was to become the NIHR Southampton Biomedical Research Centre, which has supported LifeLab ever since. I worked closely with Jackie Bay. In New Zealand, lens science at the University of Auckland had been the original inspiration for the programme, and Jackie was exceptionally generous with her time and expertise in helping us get the programme up and running. We got some funding to work with teachers to develop the programme, and to be honest, that curriculum is still pretty much the basis of what we use now. And through those years, we didn't have our own space. We ran sessions at the Maths and Science Learning Centre, which was part of the Southampton Education School. And for quite a while, it was just me. Teacher, technician, researcher, grant writer, all rolled into one. I was quite often transporting equipment around in my car, almost a mobile LifeLab. though Seb did quite like Skelly coming home to visit. I was super fortunate that Tina from the MRC used to come and help me out in delivering sessions. She was an absolute lifesaver, though somehow she managed to hide away from all the photos that we took. And none of this would have happened without the Life Lab directors, Keith, Mark, Hazel, Marcus, Janice, Ian, and later on Chris and Mary. They were full of energy and enthusiasm, doing this on top of their jobs, one of those small side projects that you fit in alongside everything else. And one of the reasons for Life Lab's success and longevity has been these people who championed it and kept pushing doors open. Wouldn't take no for an answer, are always super enthusiastic and positive. Keith's glass is always 95% full. By working their magic, we got approval and support to develop our own space at the heart of the hospital here. We've been fortunate with truly visionary chief execs at the hospital to enable a space at the hospital dedicated to engaging and educating young people with the vision of preventing them coming back through the doors in 30 years' time in ill health is pretty remarkable. And at the same time, we'd received funding from the Bupa Foundation to run a pilot randomised controlled trial in comparison with New Zealand. And this gave us a chance to start building the team. And this is when I really started to appreciate the power of this thing that we were creating. We advertised for a teacher, and the application showed us people were really interested in what we were doing. We ended up recruiting 2 teachers. I do have a habit of not being able to say no to awesome people. And it was a brilliant combination. Hannah was a primary school teacher and had completed a medical degree here at Southampton first. Alongside her, Lisa, this amazing experienced secondary science teacher who'd been head of science in Southampton schools and was willing to give up the security of a permanent job to take a risk on what we were doing. We also recruited a technician, James, to help bring all of this to life. It was definitely the start of a dream team. So, we'd secured funding, we were recruiting schools, Lisa and Hannah were getting familiar with the programme, and then on the side we also decided to set up a summer school for teenagers thinking about going into medicine, just in our spare time. And during all of this, our actual space at the hospital was being built. Towards the end of 2013 it was finally finished, and we had our first students through the doors, with our official royal opening coming about 8 months later. We had 6 schools recruited to take part in that first trial, which was around 300 students, and the 3 of us were on a pretty steep learning curve around conducting randomised controlled trials in schools. We were lucky there was a local teacher, Holly, who wanted to do an education master's, and so her thesis became our evaluation. And so we started to build the evidence base, showing that we could improve young people's knowledge about how early life affects future health, not just their own, but the health of their future families. And 6 months later, they still got it. And they were also being inspired with STEM careers. Never one to slow down. Alongside running that pilot trial, we also secured funding for the next trial from British Heart Foundation. This brought with it another teacher and, excitingly, a researcher. Again, just so taken aback with the applications. Donna brought another huge wealth of teaching experience. We also like to see her as epitomising, on behalf of us all, the healthy lifestyles choices for Life Lab. We were definitely cheering her on from the sidelines when she went for her Ironman competition. And Polly, as our researcher, what a joy it was to have that bundle of fun on the team. BHF trial scaled up from 6 to 38 schools, about 3,000 students, and we didn't struggle to recruit, which showed me that schools were really buying into what we were trying to do, even if it meant they were a control school and didn't have access to the programme for a year. We showed similar impact on health knowledge, and interestingly, students who took part were actually starting to judge their own lifestyles more critically. So they were less likely to say they were healthy, which might sound like a negative, but actually showed that they were thinking more critically about their choices. We showed that we were increasing health literacy, and this is currently unpublished data, very soon to be published. But we have shown in a small sample size and with small effect size that students who participate in the LifeLab programme attain better in their science GCSE exam than their peers in the same school who hadn't participated in LifeLab. For the programmes that we were running, we'd all been trained in healthy conversation skills, pioneered by Wendy and Mary, and we were whatting and howing all over the place. We'd also worked with Wendy to align the programme to behaviour change principles. But somehow, despite working alongside each other, knowing about each other's work, we'd kind of been operating in parallel rather than actually pulling it all together. Which feels a bit crazy to me now, because if I hadn't thought to myself that I must remember to talk about this with Mary at least 5 times every hour, then I'm probably asleep. It was from around about now that we really started to work more closely together. We'd all recognised the opportunity of what we were doing with LifeLab, but also the limitations. With our trials, we'd shown that this school-based engagement worked and that we were changing motivation to want to change behaviours. But at the end of the LifeLab day, we stood at the door, we waved goodbye, and we said good luck. And there wasn't something concrete built in to support young people in actually putting that motivation into action. And so Mary took on the joy of writing what I think must be one of the longest NIHR programme grants in history. Each B felt like a real shift for us. For NIHR to fund this large-scale, school-based public health trial felt quite risk-taking for them. And for us, it brought funding to have a full team working on designing, running and evaluating the trial. And what a brilliant team it was. At the end of the LifeLab day, students make a pledge of one small action that they want to take. And the aim of this trial was to take this 3-component intervention, so teach professional development, the LifeLab curriculum, but then excitingly to work with proper game designers to develop a gamified app, giving something tangible to young people to take home with them to support them turning their motivation into action. And really crucially, we had time. We had time to develop outcome measures, to run a pilot trial, and we were full in the swing of recruiting for our main trial in 2020. When all of a sudden, one of our biggest selling points became our biggest hurdle. We were based at the heart of the hospital at the start of the pandemic. And this kind of marks a bit of a divergence point for us with the work that we do at LifeLab. I mean, our school-based work just stopped, our in-person activity just stopped. But it gave us opportunities, using that annoying term, to pivot what we were doing, and it forced us all to really reflect on the work that we do and how and why we do it. The key activity for us was the saliva testing programme. This looked at piloting what whole-scale community testing could look like, using a simple, non-invasive test, saliva in a pot. For us, it was about how we could support school communities to be more open, providing that stability for young people. This was only possible through the buy-in and commitment from school leaders. And Harry, the head teacher at Cantel, was an absolute powerhouse in making this happen. And the trust from him in what we were trying to do and the commitment to close working together meant that for that pilot phase of this programme, we could really make a difference to those young people and school communities. You know, this was before we had LFD testing, so it gave reassurance to young people, teachers and their families and the leaders in schools. But for this to be a success, it was important that everyone bought into the testing regime. They had to commit to the programme. And to do that, people needed to understand why it was important, not just being told to follow rules, but to understand the science behind why it mattered. So we developed teaching materials for secondary schools. That's Donna giving a Zoom lesson to one of the Cantel classes. We had primary school materials, and we had materials for special educational needs settings as well. And these are just some reflections, I probably can't read them, sorry, but these are some reflections from the young people who took part, showing the impact the project had on them. It just showed how safe it made them feel, being able to be part of something and be able to go to school knowing that everyone else was testing. We shifted into a rollout phase, the ambition being to offer to all schools in the Hampshire and the Isle of Wight region And I don't think I'm exaggerating to say it was a pretty intense time for us, looking at Donna, Natasha, Rachel and Jo. And by the end of the programme, which ran until March 2022, when LFD testing and vaccines were widely available, over 27,000 students had taken part from across 73 schools and colleges, which is an awful lot of spit. But looking back on a couple of legacies from that time, first one was that we developed LifeLab Online. It's become our mainstay of how we can easily share our resources with people. Kath was brilliant in helping us navigate that process with the IT Innovations Group and Sunhay. And big ups to Claire and our team for being our absolute guru in keeping it going since. Claire had visited LifeLab as an undergraduate. She liked what we were doing, and when our technical lead job came up, she applied for it. She now job shares with Elizabeth, who joined us just last year, and has hit the ground running, and between them they keep us all running smoothly. The second legacy for me was developing the Early Life Lab programme. Donna stepped up to lead this, and we recruited two fabulously creative primary school teachers, Natasha and Rachel. We already had the beginnings of an Early Life Lab programme through Hannah, based around flight cases to go out to schools, but the saliva testing programme gave rise to the COVID-19 Warriors, a team of characters who really helped to bring the learning to life for children. And my long-term vision for LifeLab had always been that we needed repeated engagement opportunities. A one-off programme at secondary school was only ever going to have a limited impact. And I had this vision of a programme that spanned the educational journey. And the COVID-19 Warriors gave us the impetus to make it happen. After the pandemic, they had a transformation and became the Health Warriors, and we had our LifeLab Spiral, or snail, as some people like to call it. All of our programmes share the same underlying ethos. They start with teacher professional development. From there, every programme has a series of lessons to be delivered in school aligned to the science curriculum, and hands-on experiential activities. The programmes are designed to build the scientific literacy skills that underpin health literacy, bringing science to life through contexts that are relevant and meaningful to children and young people. And along the way, we're also looking at raising aspirations. So, our Health Warriors. The Health Warriors programme includes 6 modules that span the whole of primary school. When a school signs up, they receive a flight case, absolutely packed with goodies, lesson plans, PowerPoints, workbooks, every resource they could possibly need, ready to go, supported by a series of videos featuring our Health Warriors characters. And there are QR codes if you want to look at the programmes yourself, and you can meet the Health Warriors. Currently, every Southampton primary school can have access. We have felt the support over the years from Debbie Chase, Director of Public Health in Southampton, and this is tangible funding from Southampton City Council alongside the widening participation and social mobility team here at the university, or WPSM for short, because they come up again and it's quite a mouthful. We're also incredibly lucky to have Morgan, our NIHR-funded PhD student, who's evaluating the programme. She's been developing some really cool methods to get children to write stories about their experiences with the Health Warriors. Moving up the spiral. For secondary school, we have our Me, My Health and My Children's Health programme, which has been the basis of our trials and includes the visit to the hospital. But as part of this, they also have a Meet the Scientist session, or the Meet the Person who works with science, research, healthcare in any possible way. It's just that that's not as catchy a title. And this session is only possible because of the awesome researchers, healthcare workers, scientists and technicians who work across the university and the hospital and give up their time to get involved. And during that LifeLab day, students get to just sit and chat with these people, ask them whatever they want, hear about the amazing work that's happening right on their doorstep. And the impact of even those short conversations is brilliant. I should also say that the secondary programme is also supported by WPSM. It's been a really important partnership for us, in making sure that we're reaching the young people who most need access to these opportunities. Our other programmes for secondary schools include our work with Theatre for Life. This began towards the end of COVID with a chance introduction to Michelle, and our projects have combined arts, theatre and science to engage young people. We've developed escape rooms, exploring climate change and brain health. We've run creative workshops to support women and girls to talk about their healthcare experiences. And the subsequent performances that Michelle has created bring science to an audience in a way that nothing else quite replicates. And having this as part of how we engage young people feels like a really exciting development. We also have Millie doing an NIHR-funded PhD looking at the food choices young people make when they're at school. This started as an idea for Janice and I when Seb started secondary school. Those of you with teenagers will know that they use their thumbprint to buy their food at school. And I remember thinking, as you do if you're a researcher and you can't ever quite switch off, that there was this extraordinary wealth of data being collected about what teenagers actually choose to eat. Not what they say they eat on self-report questionnaires, but what they're actually buying. Millie's been working closely with a school to navigate data sharing and consent processes, and with Sarah, they've developed a protocol to analyse what's a pretty remarkable data set. And the insights coming out are genuinely interesting about what choices are available to young people in school, what they choose, but really importantly, what the pressures and levers are on guiding those choices. One of the things I've come to appreciate over the years is how much happens from chance conversations with people. Someone mentions something in passing and suddenly a whole new direction opens up. And that's what happened with the peer-to-peer component. A senior public health practitioner at Southampton City Council told me about a programme they were running, a Royal Society for Public Health qualification that trains young people as peer educators. And we know that messages land differently for young people when they come from their peers. So this sounded right up our street. Since that chance conversation, we've built a strong partnership with RSPH, and Lisa, as part of her ongoing brilliance, has been working with them to develop, pilot and launch a shorter version of this qualification, the Young Health Activists. And that senior public health practitioner, wow, another chance conversation, this time at the school gate. She mentioned that she was interested in doing a PhD. And that pinged all sorts of ideas in my head. Someone embedded in the local authority doing a PhD, what a brilliant idea. And Ravita's PhD went on to explore how local government policy can be optimised to tackle childhood obesity. The moral of that story is, be careful who you chat to at the school gate. Developing talent. This strand grew out of the Meet the Scientist session. We've always looked for ways to inspire young people with the possibilities of careers, supporting pathways to futures that they might not have imagined for themselves. And leading this strand is Kate. I first met Kate back in 2010 when it was just me at LifeLab. She was in the WPSM team and became one of those people I'd have regular conversations with about what I was trying to do with LifeLab and how it aligned with WPSM. And over many years, those conversations built into a really great partnership. So it felt like a natural next step when, supported by Sinead, who's head of Access, in 2018, she came to work across both teams, becoming a genuine bridge between us. I mentioned earlier that in 2013 we started a summer school for students thinking about going into medicine. Well, it's still going and getting more in demand every year. This year, the 40 spaces booked out within 9 hours of Kate opening the booking. We're thinking of getting some kind of online queuing system, you know, like Oasis, but we might not use the dynamic pricing model. But maybe we should. We've now had almost 700 young people take part in our Experience Medicine with LifeLab programmes altogether. But giving young people a taste of careers through the summer school, through work experience, still felt like we were doing things for them rather than with them. We'd always talked about how we co-created with young people, but the reality was it was more consultative. We'd develop something, we'd pull in a group of young people to get them to tell us what they thought, we'd give them a voucher to say thanks, and then we'd go away and make changes. And that's not really co-creation. And again, over COVID, I started thinking, well, why can't we just employ young people to work directly with us? Not as a consultation group, but as colleagues. I mean, why couldn't we employ 14-year-olds at the university? So I took that challenge to HR. I wasn't convinced it was going to work, but Ruth Nash, who lots of you will know, was an absolute champion. And in the summer of 2022, we employed our first group of young people for the Life Lab Youth Panel. Since then, we've run 14 youth panels, employing over 80 young people from a pool of about 500 applications, which gives us a really huge challenge when it comes to shortlisting and interviewing, because we don't like turning anybody down. The range of what they've done is genuinely hard to summarise. They've responded to government calls for evidence on vaping and the curriculum review. They've created resources on vaping harms that are now accredited by the PSHE Association and requested by teachers across the country and even internationally. They developed an exam wellbeing resource. They worked on REF impact case studies and interviewed and written magazine articles about some of our researchers. And a personal highlight, in our first youth panel, they produced animations explaining clinical research to young people, starring a cast of squirrels, with a shout out to my brother for supplying the photos. Turns out squirrels are very effective science communicators. The Next Gen Researcher programme grew out of the same thinking, but with a different ambition. Where the youth panel involves young people in our work, Next Gen trains them to design and lead their own work. Pathways to Health, led by Jo, was a consortium project exploring how culture and neighbourhood shape the pathways to health. And we wanted to understand this through the eyes of young people, what culture meant to them, what it meant for their health, and how their neighbourhoods influenced that. And we wanted to do it by training young people in research skills so they could ask those questions themselves and gather the evidence from their peers. And so the Next Gen Researcher programme was born. 2 people came into our team through Next Gen. Cara came to interview for a Life Lab role, and we all thought she was great, but I had a strong feeling she'd be perfect for the Pathways research role. I don't think I was that popular with Lisa and Donna for poaching her, but we did get an equally great person for Life Lab in Beth, and I'd like to think I'm a bit vindicated in supporting Cara on her research journey, given that she's just started her PhD with Mary. And Naomi, who left us just last week for an exciting new life abroad. I think she's currently hanging out in Las Vegas. Again, she interviewed for one role, but was clearly the perfect person for a different one. And we couldn't have been more right. The way she works with young people to create safe spaces for them to really flourish has been a real joy to be part of, and the Next Gen programme would not be what it is without her. But don't worry, we have an equally brilliant new person leading the Next Gen programme for us, Nick. So the first run of what we called back then the Young Researcher Training Programme taught us a lot. We could see the impact it was having for the young people, but also for us and for the decision makers in the room. So staying true to our principles, we decided we should develop the programme properly in partnership with young people. Over a week in the summer holidays, we worked with a group of young people to script, perform a brilliant set of videos bringing the key elements of the research cycle to life. We then ran a youth panel to design each session of that programme. The videos that came out of that week were so good that we decided they deserved a proper launch, a red carpet event. I'd show them to you now and they'd probably be more entertaining, but we actually don't have the time. So again, the QR code's up there if you want to have a look at them yourself later. This work gave us another connection with WPSM, not just through their financial support, but what mattered more was the time that Emma, Katrina and Becky spent working alongside us. Through that experience, we discovered how closely our values aligned. We think in similar ways, we share the same vision, and we hold that same commitment to championing young people. So we've now delivered 4 cohorts of Next Gen, developing and iterating the programme each time. We're now up to 16 sessions. I think we're staying at 16. One of the most recent innovations has been the inclusion of a co-production assembly, where the young people present their evidence to decision makers, and then they co-create actionable recommendations together. NextGen really has grown out of working across faculties and disciplines, and the mix of perspectives has pushed all of our thinking in directions none of us would have reached alone. Who knew that an archaeologist, health psychologist, a political scientist, and me would make such a good team and time? That sounds either like an inappropriate joke or the strapline to an Indiana Jones film. Again, the interest in this programme shows we've had over 300 applications for 80 places. And these aren't the typical young people who get these opportunities. We're reaching young people from all walks of life. There's still more to do, always, and we can only work with small groups at a time. But one of the things I'm most proud of is how accessible this programme is. Even though we're training young people in some pretty advanced research skills, the way Naomi, Cara and now Nick work with these young people is really impressive. And the young people who've trained with us go on to do remarkable things. They've stood up and given talks, won poster prizes, taken up job opportunities and joined new research groups. The work they've done has changed the way services are delivered for them in their communities. The current model runs on 3 levels. First, we train cohorts of young people directly. Second, we train trainers to train their own cohorts, whether that's young people or adult community researchers. We found the programme works equally well. And third, and this is where Nick's really currently focusing, the Next Gen Academy, where everyone who's been through the training can remain part of an ongoing community connecting with future opportunities. The final sweep of the spiral, college and beyond. This is probably our least developed strand, but we do have a programme that we can offer to colleges and sixth forms, mainly for biology, PE, health and social care students. We also offer internships to undergraduate students, and it's always great when we read through their applications, and some of them are talking about how they came to Life Lab when they were at school. And so that's our spiral. It's pretty packed, and we've reached quite a lot of people over the years since our doors opened at the hospital. Almost 30,000 at the last count. And here in our region, the schools who take part are spread across the south coast. So we're really reaching schools across the south coast, Isle of Wight, up through Hampshire. And some other key highlights. We've trained almost 800 teachers in Life Lab programmes, so they're all watting and howing. We've offered over 400 work experience opportunities, and one of the things I think is really great is that we've employed over 150 14-plus-year-olds here at the university. Throughout all of this, we've been having conversations with people around the world who were interested in what we were doing and wanted to think about how they could develop something similar in their own settings. And Life Lab as it exists here isn't something you can simply pick up and put down somewhere else. Our programmes tell the stories we want to tell, has the focus we feel is right for young people here, works within our national curriculum and our understanding of how schools operate. In another place, it has to be rebuilt around the needs of the young people there, the systems in place, the context that matter to them. So around 2019, we had visits from colleagues in Dublin, Sydney and Soweto. 3 conversations, 3 very different contexts. And over the past few years, we've worked together, learning from each other, sharing ideas and challenges and inspiration. And in early 2024, with funding from the Sustainability and Resilience Institute, we all came together in Southampton. We heard about the adaptations that had been made in each site, what was working, what the impact was. And something that was really striking to me was the similarity of what we were hearing. Quotes from young people that could have been from young people taking part in our programmes here in Southampton, teachers valuing it in the same way and facing similar challenges. But it's really exciting to see that what we've got works and that we all share the same vision and principles, and I think we're all really looking forward to seeing how it develops further. So we've spent 16 years building the evidence base. The trials have been run, we know LifeLab works, but we want to know what happens over time, not just whether LifeLab changes a single outcome measure at 12 months, but what it means to someone 5, 10, 15 years later. With the Hatch team in the school, Kay and Caroline, we're currently running an evaluation, trying to reach people who've taken part in LifeLab, to hear from them about what the impacts have been. So if you, your child, your students, anyone you know has participated, please share our survey and complete it. I think new posts have gone out on social media, so give us a follow and share them for us. And with Mary, we're developing plans to explore linking to routinely collected national data, looking at health service use, educational attainment, life trajectories over time, moving beyond what a controlled trial can tell us to what actually happens in the real world. None of this happens without sustainable funding, and that's been one of the most persistent challenges that we face. One of the reasons I wanted to move into the School of Healthcare Enterprise and Innovation was Cheryl, someone who I felt genuinely understood what we were trying to do and who brings real creativity and energy to thinking about how we fund it differently and more sustainably. And I've been working with Susan, Pete and Matt in the school to produce a corporate sponsorship brochure. There are copies outside, so please take one, take several, hand them out to people you know. Part of that sustainability story is about visibility. So much of what we do depends on people knowing we exist. Commissioners, funders, partners, schools. And Sian worked with us for a bit as our communications lead and really transformed how we think about putting what we do out there. And I've just worked with Becky Atwood, again, who many of you will know, to publish our latest impact report. Again, there's copies outside for you to take away with you. So, 16 years, and it's never been more important. A recent Food Foundation report made for sobering reading. Children's height has been falling, overweight and obesity has been rising, type 2 diabetes in young people has been increasing, and babies born today will enjoy a year less good health than babies born a decade ago. At the same time, reports show that children and young people in the UK have the highest levels of low life satisfaction among young people across comparable countries, and around 1 in 3 children are living in poverty. It's a pretty shocking indictment of our country, that for all the talk about children and young people and how important they are, actually committing to and funding work to change their trajectories seems to be pretty low priority. But I want to finish where I began. I started this lecture with a 6-year-old school report and a story about postcodes and predictors. And I told you that my beginning changed, not because I became a different person, but because of the people around me, who believed in me, who pushed at doors, who saw me as an individual rather than an anonymous child lost in the masses. And that support network matters. Parents, family, teachers, friends, youth workers, the wider community. It's the adults who show up in young people's lives in all sorts of ways. That's what changes a story. I also have my own young person who has grown up almost in parallel with LifeLab. Seb has shown me more than any data set could how much the years of adolescence matter. I've seen how opportunities come and go, how quickly a path can narrow or open up, and how much it means to a young person to feel that people believe in them and are invested in their future. I am constantly amazed by the extraordinary young people we work with, and I'm beyond delighted that some of them are in the audience and online. And they are extraordinary, and yet at the same time, they're completely ordinary. They're the teenagers you walk past in the supermarket, the young people you see hanging out at the bus stop, the teens meeting in the park, and the students you walk past in the school corridors. They're all extraordinary, and it's up to all of us to work together with them to make sure their futures are as bright as possible. What they need, what I needed, is for people to believe in them, to push at doors for them, to see them. And that's what we try to do at LifeLab. And as long as there are young people whose beginnings haven't yet been changed, there is still more work to be done. Before I actually finish and let you go, I also wanted to say that I've worked in Southampton for nearly 20 years now, and the reason is in this room and online. The culture of a place is made by its people, and I feel extraordinarily lucky to work somewhere, the university, the hospital, Biomedical Research Centre, local authorities, schools and colleges, the community organisations that seem to attract people who are genuinely collegiate, who share ideas freely, who turn up for each other, who are generous with their time, who give me the opportunities to work with their whole family. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Holloways. I haven't been able to mention everyone tonight. I didn't want this to simply become a roll call, but to everyone who has shared a conversation with me, shared a coffee, sparked an idea, or just quietly made something possible that I didn't even realise needed doing, thank you. A particular thank you has to go to the team, sitting at the back, that make LifeLab possible, including, of course, all of our young people. Big loves to my family, living here and in Canada. And without forgetting the people who have funded the work over the years, please keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. That was outstanding. So my name is John Holloway. I'm the Associate Vice President Interdisciplinary Research at the University, and it's my absolute privilege to try and sum up this amazing journey that we've heard about. You pitched it as change the beginning and you changed the whole story, and you've proved that it's true, that it's what you believe in and what runs through everything that you do. We've seen your belief in making a difference, your belief in young people, and your belief that it will work. I just keep doing it and people will find a way to help me and make LifeLab succeed, and it has. We've also seen the post-its. I'm really glad we've seen the post-its. Many of us who've done Meet the Scientist live and die by the post-it comments we get back from the young people, which are always a pleasure and sometimes highly amusing to read. And I'm sure that if we gave out post-its to everyone in the audience here today, universally they would be feeding back the amazement at what you've achieved over your career. I've seen it in so many ways. Meet the Scientist, leadership roles within the faculty, trying to make sure that LifeLab can succeed and grow within our community, because it's such an important part of it. I've worked with the youth panel, and that was an amazing experience, and I'd recommend any academic here to get involved in those youth panels if an opportunity comes up. I still remember with you at Westminster at Evidence Week, where we had to convince the organisers that we could actually bring young people to Parliament. We had to promise that we would always be with them, and by the end of the morning we told the two young people with us that they were in charge and we were going for a coffee. And we just left them to talk to the MPs and researchers and policymakers on their own, and they loved it and they were a hit. So I just want to thank you again for an inspirational journey. You are an inspiration to so many people, both within our community of the university, but within the community of the city, the hospital, and of course the youth. I've seen the impact you've had on people, not least my own family, that have been through LifeLab and ended up working for LifeLab. Never seem to leave. But I'll finish there because there's so much more I could say. and I don't want to delay the celebrations anymore. But once again, I think we should all congratulate Kath on both an amazing lecture and an amazing journey. Congratulations.